as the color of amber. And he put forth the form of an hand, and took me by a lock of mine head. And the Spirit lifted me up between the earth and the heaven. So there again we see that earth is above. Earth is below, sorry, and heaven is above. And brought me in the visions of God to Jerusalem, to the door of the inner gate that looketh toward the north, where was the seat of the image of jealousy, which provoked to jealousy. So here again, Ezekiel, a prophet of the Most High Yahuwah, he also wore locks, because he said here that he was taken by a lock of his hair. It did not say how many locks he had on his head, but it said it took him by one lock of his head. Ezekiel 44 verses 20 tells us that all the priests, Ezekiel 44 verse 20 says, and this particular chapter is talking about the priests. It says, neither shall they shave their heads, nor suffer, or if you want to say, nor allow, nor suffer their locks. Here we see the word locks again, to grow long. They shall only poll their heads. And I'm going to explain poll in a little bit after here. So here we see that the priests too, the priests who were officiating in the temple, they also wore locks, but they were told distinctly not to wear long locks, nor were they to shave their heads. They were only to poll their heads. Number 6, and I'm not going to go through all of that, explain the Nazirite vows. That particular chapter tells you that once a man or a woman takes a Nazirite vow, that they're not going to cut their hair. They're going to just allow their hair to grow. And like I said, if it's African American hair or Negroid hair, it's going to start locking after a while if you're not combing it or plaiting it. And we're still talking about that indicator appearance of the Hebrews. I'm looking at the hair at this point. 1 Peter chapter 3 verses 1 through 6. 1 Peter chapter 3 verses 1 through 6. It says, likewise, ye wives, be in subjection to your own husbands, that if any obey not the word, they also may without the word be won by the conversation of the wise, while they behold your chaste conversation coupled with fear, whose adorning, let it not be that outward adorning of plaiting the hair, and of wearing of gold, or of putting on of apparel, but let it be the hidden man of the heart, in that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, which is in the sight of Yah of great price. So here it says that the Hebrews, or the Hebrew women there, were not to focus on plaiting their hairs or putting on jewelry. That should not be the focus. So this text in itself too tells us that the Hebrew women plaited their hair. And if you know today, who are the women who plait their hair? We all know that it's the African American women, or women in Jamaica or wherever. These are the people who normally would plait their hair. They wear weave or braids or something like that. 2 Samuel 14 verses 25 to 27, and here I'll explain the polling. 2 Samuel 14 2 Samuel 14, 25 through 27. But in all Israel there was none to be so much praised as Absalom for his beauty. From the sole of his foot even to the crown of his head there was no blemish in him. And when he polled his head, for it was at every year's end that he polled it, because the hair was heavy on him, therefore he polled it. He weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels after the king's weight. And before I explain, let's look at 2 Samuel chapter 18, verses 9 to 10. 18 verses 9 through 10. And Absalom, and let me say too, Absalom was David's son. He was the one who wanted to overthrow David's reign and to be in charge. And so that's the background story of Absalom. And Absalom met the servants of David, and Absalom rode upon a mule, and the mule went under the thick boughs of a great oak, and his head caught hold of the oak, and he was taken up between the heaven and the earth, and the mule that was under him went away. And a certain man saw it and told Joab and said, Behold, I saw Absalom hanged in an oak. So how is it? How could it be that Absalom was hanging from an oak tree with his hair? If his hair was straight, like Caucasian or even an Indian, it could easily just pull through by the time he got caught in the boughs of the tree. If you look, it said he had heavy hair on his head, so he had to cut his hair at the end of every year's end. Because for those of you who know people who wear the lock style, because I'm from Jamaica, and there we do have some men and women who wear locks. In fact, we have some here too in the US too, who wear locks, and they wear their locks very, very long. And when they would go to the beaches or to the rivers just to swim, that hair is so heavy on them that it's tremendous. And so I can relate to the fact that Absalom his hair was heavy, but once the kinky hair, the negroid hair, that is a lot, gets water in it, it soaks it up and it becomes extremely heavy. So he had to cut his hair at the end of every year because it was so heavy upon him. And it would appear that because his hair was so thick, he got caught with the branch and it held him up and he could not even move from where he was. John chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, and this story is well known. John 12, 1 through 3. Then Jesus, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, which had been dead, whom he raised from the dead. There they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was one of them that sat in the table with him. Then took Mary a pound of ointment of spikenard, very costly, and anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the odor of the ointment. Now here again, you may say, why am I talking about this? But the word here, right there, was the same word, Hebrew word, that was used to describe the hair of Absalom, the hair of Solomon, the hair of Ezekiel, all the others that I mentioned before. It was the same Hebrew word that referred to these this sort of tightly curled hair. Now Mary here, who took the ointment, or we could possibly think of some essential oils, she used it and she poured it on Yahushua. And she used her hair, that same type of hair. And if you know the Negroid hair, that is woolly, it absorbs anything. It absorbs water because it tends to be dry. So if you have oil or this ointment that she poured on our Savior, we can really understand her using that hair, that dry hair, to mop it all up, because the hair is going to just suck it all up. It's going to be almost like she didn't even put any oil in her hair. Because those of you with my type of hair, that black kinky hair, you know it absorbs water, it absorbs grease. It's like it cannot get enough. Think of a Caucasian woman wiping Yahushua's feet with her hair. With all that oil, it's gonna be really messy, really messy. And later on, I'm gonna explain a little bit why I'm stressing being messy as a woman using your hair, and then you find it's dripping with the oil. Her hair was not dripping at all after she wiped it, after she wiped his feet, because it had sucked up everything in her hair. And so that is indicator number 2, that the hair was either locked or shaved or bald. Now indicator number 3, the dress. How were these people dressed as Hebrews, as Israelites? Let us look at Isaiah chapter 3, verses 16 through 26. Isaiah chapter 3, (16 through 26). Moreover, Yahuwah said, because the daughters of Zion are haughty, and walk with stretched forth necks and wanton eyes, walking and mincing as they go, and making a tinkling with their feet. Therefore the Lord will smite with a scab the crown of the head of the daughters of Zion, and the Lord will discover their secret parts. In that day the Lord will take away the bravery of their tinkling ornaments about their feet, and their calls, and their round tires like the moon, the chains, and the bracelets, and the mufflers, the bonnets, and the ornaments of the legs, and the headbands, and the tablets, and the earrings, and the rings, and nose jewels, the changeable suits of apparel, and the mantles, and the wimples, and the crisping pins, the glasses, and the fine linen, and the hoods, and the veils. And it shall come to pass that instead of sweet smell, there shall be stink, and instead of a girdle, a rent, and instead of well-set hair, baldness, and instead of a stomacher, a girding of sackcloth, and burning instead of beauty. So here we have a very good description of how the Hebrew women were dressed. And I decided to look up these words in the Hebrew, because you know sometimes you read it as it is there and you can't really get the full picture. I decided for this video not to show you any pictures. I'm not going to show you any pictures at all. I would like you to formulate your own picture of how these women look. The bonnets. The bonnets were actually and are fancy headdresses. Fancy headdresses. That's what the bonnets were. The tires. The tires are actually round pendant for the neck, big heavy necklaces. Ankle chains, the ornamental ankle chains that you put around your ankles, and they have little things on it, so the tinkling with the feet. Bracelets were the